Salutations. This video is an analysis of Stephen Crowder's broadcast on Jerusalem saying Trump is right, Palestinians deserve nothing. So Stephen Crowder, he's a Canadian-American shock jock. He's like a thinking man's version of Alex Jones. I'm being a little bit flippant there because Mr. Crowder doesn't tell lots of blatant lies, and he's more decent than Jones. He doesn't come out with daft conspiracy theories. Mr. Crowder, he says it's fantastic that Trump sent the US embassy to Jerusalem. He then castigates Germany for not going along to the opening ceremony, putting on a German accent and appealing to the basest anti-German prejudices, calling them Nazis for not recognizing Jerusalem, which is a nauseatingly bigoted thing to say. You know, the Nazi Party is banned in Germany, not in the USA. Publishing Mein Kampf is banned in Germany, not in the USA. Flying the swastika is banned in Germany. Denying the Holocaust is banned in Germany. Neither of these things are outlawed in the United States. Obviously, the great majority of Americans aren't Nazis either, but very, very few Germans are Nazis today. Even when the Nazis were at their most popular, 43% of people voted for them, and even that was an election where the Nazis cheated quite a lot. So why would Germany not recognize Jerusalem as their capital? Well, because they respect international law and self-determination and human rights and all the things which is a complete antithesis of Nazism. You know, Germany's obviously recognized the Holocaust, never stopped apologizing, paying reparations. Many countries committed genocide, but no other country has made such amends as Germany has. So it's disgusting that Crowder should deprecate racial prejudice whilst himself then fomenting racial prejudice. He says Trump promised to shift the US embassy, and he did. That much is true. And then Mr. Crowder said, well, previous US presidents did likewise. And then he showed footage. Now, it showed two of these presidents saying Jerusalem was the capital. It did not show them saying that they would move the embassy. One of them did. I think it was George W. Bush said he would move the embassy, but did not fulfill that promise. So Jerusalem is claimed as the capital of Palestine. The US ought to recognize Palestine as a sovereign state and open a US embassy in Palestine. Palestine claims the whole of it. Israel claims the whole of it. So why should we recognize Israel rather than Palestine as rightfully ruling the whole of it? I know that Israel's got actual control, which is not to say that the Palestinians don't have such a good legal claim. So, as Crowder observed, the United Nations founded Israel. It therefore behoves Israel, more than any other member state, to obey UN resolutions. And Israel is in breach of dozens of UN resolutions. Admittedly, these are General Assembly ones, not Security Council ones. I don't think Crowder would know the difference. He calls the United Nations the Anti-Israel League, which is preposterous because, as he pointed out, the UN was the midwife of Israel. That cannot possibly be true. So the United Nations, when it set up Israel and Palestine, it said that Jerusalem must be a shared capital. So we're going to speak about being correct, factual, as Mr. Crowder likes to be. He ought to observe that and go along with what the United Nations mandated. And as the UN created Israel, then Zionist terrorists should not have murdered Count Bernadotte, a UN diplomat who was trying to arrange a ceasefire between them and the Arabs. Now, I know that most Israelis would not countenance that crime. He mentioned various Arab-Israeli wars, and it's true that Israel's won them. He overlooked 1956, which was an outright act of aggression on Israel, and then assisted by the United Kingdom and France, when the Arab countries had not declared war on them. All right, there was some guerrilla activity. They said, but the Egyptians are building up their military. They were. So are the Israelis. That's not casus belli. You wouldn't consider it acceptable for Egypt to declare war on Israel just because the Israelis are building up their military. He cited Helen Thomas saying Palestine is occupied, which is absolutely correct. Gaza, well, not Gaza anymore, sorry. The West Bank is often known as the occupied territories. There are scores of Israeli illegal settlements there. Crowder takes a very firm line on illegal immigration, saying boot them out, except when, of course, it's Israeli illegal immigration to Palestine. And these colonies have been there for decades in some cases. Now, I'm for forgiveness. If people have been there for a long time, all right, we might let them stay. But that's up to the Palestinians if they'd like to grant these people permanent residency, citizenship. But obviously, the illegal immigrants in Palestine, they've got to start off by, first of all, recognizing that it is Palestine and seeking permission. So it's stealing land. Crowder talks about moral absolutes. This is a clear-cut moral issue. And Helen Thomas was saying, go back to Poland, go back to Germany. Well, actually, Jewish people are not in danger in those countries, but they are in danger from terrorist attacks in Israel. Some Israelis have taken German citizenship, and they were granted on the basis that their ancestors lived there a few generations ago. They are safer there. Synagogues operate freely in Poland and Germany. I've been into them in Poland. Anyway, so Crowder, he obviously hates the idea of Israelis leaving illegally occupied land, but he loves deportations from the United States, which is a strange inconsistency, hypocrisy indeed. So Palestinians have been driven out of their homes in 1948 and 1967, and by continual bombing more recently. In the last 10 years, over 2,000 Palestinian civilians killed by the Israeli military, and only 12 Israeli civilians killed. I wouldn't like anybody to be killed, but you see the massive inequality in the death toll. Now, Israel's got better arms, it's got smarter weapons, therefore it should be easy for them to avoid civilian deaths. Which is more likely to be collateral damage, 12 or 2,000? You tell me. Can he count? So he says, let's be moral. All right, well, let's be moral and not kill such a staggering number of civilians. Think of that imbalance. 200 to 1. 200 to 1 is jaw-dropping, the imbalance. But you won't see that reflected in the US media. And he was quipping that because he's advocating for Israel, he'll be said to be taking Jewish gold and things like that. And that is a well-known anti-Semitic trope. Is there a Zionist lobby in the United States? There certainly is. The American Israeli Public Affairs Committee and all that. Now, they have their agenda. They want to promote that. Fair enough. I don't object to that. It's only right that Palestinians or Arabs and Muslims who've got some fellow feeling for Palestinians ought to be able to put their case. And, people who do this, like Helen Thomas, that was the end of her career. Saying that Israeli colonies should leave the West Bank, that was fair enough. Saying that Israelis should leave Israel, no, I don't agree. Israel has a right to exist. Palestine has a right to exist. Israel has a right to defend herself. The same must apply to Palestine. So, anyway, Crowder, he opposes reparations for slavery and all sorts of things. But Germany paid reparations to the Israelis for the Holocaust. Was that wrong? So Germany's not behoved to support every Israeli policy, no matter how controversial. Crowder, he pointed out that Arabs tried to wipe Israel off the map, which is true. They did try to defeat it, and there was some very blood-curdling rhetoric. Palestine was already more wiped off the map, was under Israeli occupation for decades. The Gaza no longer is. And then Israelis just pretended that Palestine didn't exist, calling it Samaria or Judea, things like that. Trying to deny them their name, deny them their very name, to wipe them off the pages of history like that. Palestine has been under illegal occupation for decades. No two ways about it. Palestine is recognized as a sovereign state by dozens of nations around the world and has embassies there. He's against immorality. There were Jewish-only roads in the occupied territories. That's blatant racist discrimination. That's Jim Crow level discrimination. But Crowder doesn't talk about that. We're going to talk about morality. We have to face up to just how grossly unjust this is. And a lot of this is funded by the US government. He's very much against government subsidies. Israel's a wealthy country. It's got nuclear weapons and things like that. And yet this is funded. So he's against abortion as a moral absolute. Israel allows abortion. Palestine does not. By his own litmus test, Israel is evil and Palestine is good. Now, I don't think it that way, but he does. So the Israeli government has used moderate physical pressure. Most people count that as torture. Illegal detention, including of children. Does he support? Is that moral? And I know the Palestinian fighters have done the same thing. Now, terrorists, are they terrorists? Well, to deliberately kill civilians is terrorism. But if they are defending a country, they are the army, they are recognized by the elected government, as Hamas is, that is an army, by any definition. So There's anti-Arab prejudice in Israel, people chanting death to the Arabs and things like that. There are Arab Israelis. They're not conscripted. Why not? Because they're not regarded as full citizens. That's discrimination. I know because they're lucky not to have to serve in the army unless they want to. Israel's now become an officially Jewish state. Is that discriminatory? Imagine if the US in the Constitution said, no, we are an officially Christian country, so non-Christians will be second-class citizens. I don't think Crowder would stand for that. He claimed that Palestine is not a country. Well, it's a country by almost any definition, and there's no clear-cut definition of a country. There's a land, there are people with a particular dialect of Arabic. They have their culture, and yes, it shares quite a lot with the other Arab countries around. It's got a capital city, it's got an elected government, it's got an army, it's recognised by other nation states. In what sense is it not a country? If it's not a country, what is it? This territory, Jordan doesn't claim it, Egypt doesn't claim it. They used to govern this country for only about 20 years. It is. Countries have to start somewhere. They are man-made. Israel started as a modern country not very long ago, and Israel wasn't always in its current location. The Hebrews lived in Egypt, Goshen, for a while. They lived in Fertile Crescent. They lived in what's now Iraq, Tigris and Euphrates, as it mentions in the book of Genesis. So he said Arab Israelis have a 4 times higher standard of living in Israel. Well, that's true. Israel's had a huge amount of investment. It's had immigration of highly educated people. It's not under illegal occupation. It's even got oil in the sea. It gets lots of subvention from the United States. Presumably he must be very against that, Mr. Crowder. And it doesn't have its stuff blown up all the time. In Palestine, it's more or less the opposite. The intelligentsia are fleeing. They don't control their own borders in Gaza, and Israel prevents them importing or exporting much. Their policy is to keep people just above starvation. Use your military to protect your borders, that's what Crowder says. So let the Palestinians do the same. Shoot a home invader in the middle of the night. It's certainly morally acceptable. That's a direct quote from Stephen Crowder. Well, the Palestinian homeland is being invaded, so they're entitled to use force to defend themselves. Is it nice to blow away 50-something people because some of them are laying down landmines? But it is certainly morally acceptable, again a quotation from Mr. Crowder. So some of them are laying down landmines, which is very disputable. Some of them, so you're going to kill all of them. So again, deliberately killing civilians. The Israeli army's own published doctrine is if an unarmed person comes within 100 meters of that wall, they are shot dead, even if it's a child. Is that moral, to deliberately kill a child for coming within 100 meters of an unbreachable wall? This is gross immorality. So I think he's not well informed. He's just chosen a side and will do anything to say that side is innocent and that the others are foul. He talked about churches being bombed. There are Palestinian Christians. Did he know that? Descendants of the earliest Christians. And Palestine has got an ancient history. Heard of Philistines in the Bible? Palestine is Philistine in Arabic. Are they all the same people? Does their DNA go all the way back? I'm not sure. Maybe a little bit of it does. But many Jewish Israelis are not very Jewish in their ancestry. That's why they've got such different phenotypes. Falasha Jews are very black. Some Jews are very white. People are all sorts of in between. A UN school was bombed by Israel. And he doesn't mention that one. And he rightly deprecates Hamas for bombing schools in Israel. A foul thing to do. Is it morally wrong to target women and children? You're right, it is. Even if your side does it, Mr. Crowder. Home invaders, he deprecates those. Well, let the Palestinians defend their home. It's hard to bargain with these nations when they want complete and total destruction of Israel. Jordan and Egypt have diplomatic relations with Israel, have done for decades, but he's too ignorant to know that. And he was saying that in relation to Arab countries in general. Oman does. I can't remember which other Arab countries. Morocco does. So they don't all try to have Israel destroyed. Israel illegally occupies the Golan Heights as part of Syria, even a tiny bit of Lebanon to this day. So who's the aggressor? It's Israel. Israel has socialized medicine. The Israeli government subsidizes El Al, the airline. He regards that as evil. There's no democratic socialism, according to him. It's all tyrannical. And therefore, he should support Palestine, which is more capitalist than the other way. So, dozens of unarmed Palestinian protesters killed by the Israeli military. And you won't hear him mention that. And there's almost never on the US media. The right to self-defense. Palestinians have the right to self-defense. The right to bear arms. Crowder's fanatical about that one. Well, the Palestinians have the right to bear arms. They need arms more than anybody else. And the Israeli government was stopping humanitarian aid convoys on the high seas in international waters, killing unarmed Turkish sailors to try and prevent international aid getting through on the basis there might be weapons. Palestinians are allowed weapons, certainly in Mr. Crowder's worldview.